The research outpost on Kepri's Reach went silent at 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, not with alarms or static, but with an absence so complete it unsettled the analysts watching the feed. Environmental telemetry continued to pulse, reactors held steady, and the automated beacon repeated its status handshake into the void. People did not vanish quietly. Systems did not keep breathing after a massacre. That contradiction was the first wound. Dr. Lena Moreau had been the last to transmit a human signal, a clipped note about anomalous isotopic readings beneath the ice. She was methodical, skeptical, and famously unflappable, the kind of scientist who double-checked her own pulse before trusting a sensor. Her calm voice, preserved in the archive, was now a measure of loss. When the follow-up ping returned nothing but machine acknowledgments, Earth Command marked the outpost as compromised. On the far side of the planet, the alien officers gathered among the ruins they had created. Their armor was ceremonial, polished even after combat, bearing sigils of lineage and rank. To them, the outpost had been a minor administrative task. The humans were unarmed, unauthorized to resist, and therefore irrelevant. The officers executed the researchers efficiently, recorded compliance metrics, and moved on. Authority had been demonstrated. The matter was closed. Captain Executor Threx believed deeply in procedure. His species had survived by codifying dominance, by ensuring that every action flowed downward from an unquestioned chain of command. He approved the report with practiced indifference, noting that no formal declaration of hostility had been made. Humans, according to doctrine, would petition or protest. They always did. Earth did neither. In a subterranean chamber beneath a city that did not appear on maps, a small group reviewed the data without raised voices. Faces hardened, not with rage, but with calculation. The outpost had been civilian. The killings were deliberate. Escalation was unnecessary. Escalation was noisy. Someone asked for options. Someone else asked for accountability. The room settled on a third word: resolution. No vote was taken. No general signed an order. Instead, a single packet of encrypted information was assembled, stripped of identifiers and ceremonial language. It contained coordinates, a time window, and a brief summary of what had been lost. The packet moved through channels that officially did not exist, until it reached a man who had no rank to salute. He was on another contract when the packet arrived, observing a different sky from a different kind of shadow. He read the summary once, then again, slower. He noted the silence pattern, the officer caste, the absence of chaos. This was not a battlefield problem. It was an organizational one. He closed his eyes, not in grief, but in alignment. Somewhere, Dr. Moreau's careful notes still waited to be understood. Somewhere else, officers believed themselves untouchable because no one had told them otherwise. He erased his current assignment, rerouted his transport, and prepared equipment chosen for certainty rather than spectacle. As his vessel altered course, no announcement followed. The beacon on Kepri's Reach continued to transmit its hollow reassurance. The officers remained confident. Earth remained quiet. The silence stretched, poised to break, and this time it would not be empty. He preferred it that way. Noise invited negotiation, and negotiation assumed symmetry. This mission required neither. It required patience, attention, and the willingness to end a structure rather than confront it. As the planet's pale horizon rose on his displays, he checked nothing twice. The absence of orders was not a gap. It was freedom sharpened into purpose. Soon, the officers would learn what humans did when hierarchy failed them completely, irrevocably. He entered Kepri's Reach without ceremony. A single heatless vector slipping past orbital debris that had once been a research array. The descent was shallow and patient, designed to resemble background noise rather than intent. By the time the pod kissed the ice, no sensor flagged it as worthy of attention, which was precisely the point. He moved immediately, not from urgency, but habit. The suit sealed around him like a second decision, matte and unadorned, absorbing the world rather than reflecting it. No insignia marked allegiance. No transponder announced jurisdiction. Anyone watching would have struggled to define what he was, and that ambiguity was the first layer of defense. Names had been taken from him long ago, replaced by call signs that were discarded as soon as they accrued meaning. What remained was function. He had been trained in units that dissolved as soon as their effectiveness became known, mentored by people who never wrote after-action reports because survival was the only metric that mattered. He remembered instructors less as faces than as corrections, a grip adjusted, a breath controlled, a hesitation removed. The packet from Earth replayed in his mind, not as orders, but as context. Civilian dead. Officer caste responsible. No declaration. That narrowed the solution space. Militaries fought enemies. He dismantled assumptions. The difference was subtle but decisive. He reached the perimeter of the outpost by habit, circling once despite knowing there would be nothing left to save. Bodies had been removed with bureaucratic efficiency. Blood had frozen, scraped, or sublimated, but patterns lingered for those who knew how to read absence. He paused where Dr. Moreau's office had been, noting the crushed instruments and the careful way data cores had been extracted. The officers had wanted knowledge without witnesses. That choice mattered. His equipment reflected the same philosophy. Weapons were modular, silent, and unremarkable, built to fail safely rather than dramatically. Ammunition was limited because excess encouraged waste. Sensors fed him probabilities instead of certainties. He trusted them, but not blindly. Trust, like authority, was something he granted sparingly. The alien camp lay beyond a low ridge, its lights visible even in the perpetual dusk. The officers had not hidden. They had no reason to. Their doctrine placed safety in rank, in the belief that violence flowed downward and never rebounded. He watched them long enough to confirm routines, to see how subordinates deferred even in trivial matters. Orders were oxygen. Without them, nothing moved. He felt no anger as he observed. Anger narrowed perception, and perception was his greatest weapon. What he felt was alignment, a quiet certainty that the problem had edges and those edges could be cut. Earth had not sent him to make a statement. Statements invited replies. He reviewed contingencies that would never be spoken aloud. If captured, there would be no extraction. If killed, there would be no reprisal that could be traced. His existence was a hypothesis Earth could abandon without contradiction. That knowledge did not trouble him. It clarified things. As the planet's long night deepened, he finalized a plan built on patience and subtraction. One officer at a time, one assumption removed after another. When command collapsed, the rest would follow, not because he forced them, but because they would have nothing left to stand on. He rose from cover and began moving, already invisible, already inevitable. Somewhere far away, analysts would later debate when the outcome became inevitable. He knew the answer already. It was the moment arrogance mistook silence for safety, and humanity chose precision over permission without banners, speeches, or chains of command. Snow whispered against the steel of his armor as Orion advanced through the desolate expanse, once called the Winter Plateau. The wind howled across the tundra, carrying echoes of the destroyed research base buried beyond the ridgeline. Beneath the visor of his adaptive helmet, biometric readouts flickered, heart rate steady, oxygen optimal, adrenaline climbing. He was alone by design. No command uplink, no oversight, no mission relay. The brass had cut him from the net the moment they deployed him. He was the contingency for when diplomacy failed, for when the chain of command became a noose. The research team had gone silent 3 weeks earlier, their distress signal laced with distorted frequencies and static bursts resembling language. What returned to orbit weren't survivors, only fragments, bone, glass, and scorched instruments fused with a residue the xenobiologists couldn't classify. Now the plateau was quarantined. Orion's orders were simple and brutal. Confirm hostile presence, neutralize by any means. The moment he stepped off the transport, those orders dissolved into a singular creed that pulsed through his neural implant. No orders. No mercy. He scanned the landscape, infrared revealing heat signatures beneath the snow. Long, undulating forms buried deep. The aliens didn't fight like soldiers. They waited, coiled, patient. The first encounter came as a distortion in the air, light bending, the smell of ozone. He dropped into a crouch, rifle up, tracking the shimmer until it solidified into something vaguely humanoid. The creature's body was translucent, its structure flickering between forms, as if reality couldn't decide what to make of it. It studied him silently, head cocked. Orion didn't speak. Communication was a liability, empathy, a delay. He squeezed the trigger, and the plasma round tore through the creature's chest in a flash of light. The body convulsed, folding inward until nothing remained but a residue of cold vapor. His HUD registered a spike in local energy flux. One kill, infinite unknowns. A flicker of memory surfaced, his last debriefing on the Eidolon. The Admiral's words clipped and cold. You'll be on your own. We need deniability if this escalates. You understand what that means. Orion had only nodded. Orders were comfort. Without them, a man learned what he truly was. He moved toward the ruins of the base, stepping over shattered solar panels and torn fabric shelters half buried in snow. Inside, the silence pressed down like gravity. Desks overturned, instruments melted. Scorch marks lined the walls in a pattern. Spirals, almost mathematical, but smeared as though painted by trembling hands. On one of the remaining screens, a corrupted log flickered to life. A woman's voice, broken and terrified. They learn our frequencies, they can mimic thought, don't listen, then static. A whisper crawled through his comms, his own voice repeating back those final words. He froze. The mimicry wasn't just sound. It had learned syntax, cadence, inflection. He turned off his transmitter, relying solely on internal diagnostics. The aliens were parasitic linguists, consuming communication itself, weaponizing it. No wonder the team hadn't stood a chance. Something moved in the shadows, a reflection, a memory, or another shape-shifting entity. He drew his sidearm, stepping lightly, muscles coiled. Then came a pulse, invisible yet deafening, a vibration through bone. His helmet dimmed, vision fracturing into fragments of static and light. In that disorienting silence, he felt it, an intelligence probing at the edges of his consciousness, curious, patient, ancient. He tore off his helmet to ground himself in the cold. The air bit his skin, sharp and real. Somewhere deep inside, the part of him that remembered fear stirred. He wasn't just hunting something alien anymore. He was trespassing in a mind that didn't understand limits. The night closed in around him, alive with whispers that almost sounded human. The cold steadied him as nothing else could, slicing through lingering echoes until only the present remained. He replaced his helmet, sealing out the whispers, and recalibrated his sensors to ignore anything that tried to speak. If the enemy fed on language, then silence was starvation. He advanced toward the alien command structure, no longer cautious but precise, each step chosen to end something rather than discover it. The officers were gathered inside a modular command dome, its surface etched with symbols of authority meant to impress subordinates and intimidate rivals. Inside, hierarchy radiated from the center like heat. He could feel it in the way guards deferred, in how decisions stalled without explicit approval. He did not breach loudly. He cut power to the outer ring and waited as confusion rippled inward, subtle and paralyzing. The first officer died without understanding why. A single shot, perfectly placed, removed leadership in an instant. No alarm followed, because no one had been ordered to raise one. He moved through the structure methodically, never engaging more than necessary, never revealing pattern or intent. Each removal created a vacuum, and vacuums did the rest of the work for him. Captain Executor Threx was the last. He stood alone in the central chamber, ceremonial armor dulled, posture rigid with disbelief. He demanded identification, rank, authority. The operator listened, because listening cost nothing. When Threx finished, waiting for the ritual response, he received none. The operator raised his weapon, not in anger, but in conclusion. You act without mandate, Threx said, voice tightening. There will be consequences. There already were. The operator replied and fired. When it was over, he transmitted a single message across open alien channels, translated cleanly and without embellishment. It detailed the fate of the research team, the response taken, and the reason escalation had been unnecessary. It ended with a clarification. Humanity did not require chains of command to defend its civilians, only resolve. The signal repeated twice, then ceased. Earth received confirmation hours later. The analysts noted the collapse of alien coordination, the sudden withdrawal from contested space, the silence that followed. No press release was drafted. No commendation authorized. The file was sealed and archived under an innocuous designation. Loss acknowledged. Threat neutralized. The operator dismantled what remained of the command dome and erased traces of his passage. Before leaving, he returned to the outpost ruins and recovered what data he could, securing Dr. Moreau's notes for someone else to finish. He marked the site with coordinates only Earth would recognize, a quiet memorial without stone or ceremony. As his vessel lifted from the ice, the planet receded into darkness, another scar in a crowded universe. He felt no triumph, only completion. Somewhere, another silence would eventually form, and Earth would notice. Until then, he would remain unlisted, unnamed, and ready. The stars stretched ahead, indifferent and endless. He set a course without requesting approval and leaned back as the engines engaged. Humanity would continue exploring, continue risking itself on the promise of knowledge. And when that promise was violated, it would not always answer with fleets or flags. Sometimes it would answer with one person, unbound, unseen, and unstoppable.